You're listening to Coffee and Sports from Wire to Wire Sports Network on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Good morning and welcome. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network. Thank you so much for making us part of your morning routine. I am Chris, and of course, that over there, that is Mo. And is that Mo Teddy? Is that Mo Teddy behind Mo?
Yeah, it was not really my idea, but just to keep the peace, yeah, Teddy's here.
Good morning, Mo. It is great to see you, sir. We got a lot to get into this morning, so we are going to jump right into picking up with where we left off yesterday with our NFL games. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles. What was slated to be the game of the week in the NFL, because listen, you got two contenders for the Super Bowl here going against each other for the AFC and the NFC. And overall, I wouldn't say the game disappointed. The Eagles come out on top in that game. But Mo, here's the thing, and call me hyperbolic if you want, but I look at Lamar, and I look at the season he's having, and I look at where the Ravens were at the end of last season. And I'm going to put it in a vacuum. I'm talking the end of last season heading into the playoffs when the Ravens were the favorites to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. So I'm talking that moment until the game yesterday. And there's just been a lot of individual moments that I feel as the spotlight was big. It just hasn't gone Lamar's way since their playoff run. You look at, obviously the playoffs didn't go Lamar's way. And then you look at this season. Coming into this season, there's a couple things you wanted to see from Lamar Jackson. You wanted to see, one, he's got to beat the Steelers, right? Like that's been one of his biggest bugaboos his entire career. Can he beat the Steelers? No, he cannot. He's still struggling against the Steelers. He got a big win early. Against the Buffalo Bills. But he also had that devastating loss early with the toe against the Kansas City Chiefs. So they have the fall in the playoffs to the Chiefs, and then they get that chance right away. We talked about this all the way back in week one. You know, who did this game mean more to? And it was Lamar. Because if Lamar came back and they beat the Chiefs week one and just set the tone for the season, you know what? We don't have a hangover from being favorited and not getting it done against what was perceived to be a weaker Chiefs team. But they come out and they play a great game. I mean, they lost by a toe, Mo. They lost potentially by a toe because that would have tied the game up late. Not saying they would have won that game, but they would have been in it. So they lose by the toe. They do blow the Bills out. I'm not taking away any credit from that win. That was a huge win for them, 35-10 over the Buffalo Bills. But then they still have their struggles against the Chiefs. They have this big moment against probably one of the two best teams in the NFC, if not the best team in the NFC. They don't get the win there. They got a game coming up in a couple of weeks against the Steelers again. If they lose that game, now here's where I sit. If they lose that game to the Steelers in 2 weeks, I look at this Baltimore team, Mo, and I say, okay, they couldn't beat the Chiefs this season. That was one of their bugaboos. They still couldn't beat the Steelers this season. That was another one of their bugaboos. And aside from that, looking at their resume, yeah, they beat Buffalo, and then, they had a chance to go up against Philadelphia Eagles and say, you know what, potentially the best team in the AFC versus the best team in the NFC. They didn't win that game either. I get it. It's a vacuum. These are all individual situations. They could go win a Super Bowl right now, and none of this matters. But, Mo, I just look at the Ravens and I look at Lamar Jackson. It's just these little moments, right? It's these little moments. And look, he's still having a great season. He's still having MVP numbers. But I just feel like with Lamar, you look at him and he does all these great things, and there's always that yeah, but. And I think the yeah, buts keep growing because he hasn't had the playoff success. And if he just had one, all he needs is one, Mo. If he just had one magical playoff run where they win a Super Bowl, at least get to a Super Bowl, I think at this point for him, getting there would kind of qualm things, for a couple of seasons because he hasn't done that yet. But I feel like because he hasn't even gotten there yet, it just keeps building. And I don't know, like those are the things I look at now with him. Like, dude can't beat the Steelers. Dude has a chance to kind of silence and kind of just calm things. Week 1, couldn't beat the Chiefs. They have a chance if they go out there and they beat the Eagles in a potential Super Bowl matchup to kind of, set things back on a good note. Couldn't do that. Like, that's kind of what I'm looking at with Lamar right now.
I think the Ravens are one of those teams that they had this huge window where they could have been a Super Bowl champion. I look at them now more as a team that's a playoff contender. And I don't think it's all on Lamar. I think Lamar has still been great. The defense isn't what it was. It's been diminished. And I the addition of Derrick Henry, I think it's been everything they projected it to be. But the greater impact of a Derrick Henry for them, to me, would be once they get into the postseason, they want to be able to grind teams up. They want to be able to control the clock late. That's the value of a Derrick Henry. And I'm with you on Lamar. Terrific season. The numbers are what they are. But you know how the history of the NFL goes. There are so many great quarterbacks who put up great numbers. Their teams are always in the playoffs. They're contenders, and they just come up shy for every Tom Brady or a Montana. There are other great quarterbacks who don't have Super Bowls on their resumes for one reason or another. Or there are guys who are charmed, if you will, like an Eli Manning, who's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. Luck has a lot to do with it. Fate has a lot to do with it, whatever you want to call it. And I think, look, we almost forget sometimes Lamar Jackson is still in his mid-20s, and he's relatively healthy. So if they don't get it done this year, sure, the pressure will be there because the expectations are so high. But I think that the organization is one of the stronger organizations in the NFL. They'll do what they need to do to revamp the defense, and we'll be talking about them as one of the top contenders again next season. But yeah, I think the pressure mounts in Lamar's head. I think he feels it. I think he's aware of it, especially when you're in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes and you're seeing all the success that they're having. That has to wear on you. But at the same, and look, Joe Burrow's been to a Super Bowl. So I get it. I get where the pressure is. But I'm not going to write him off. Do I believe that they're going to win the Super Bowl this year and go on a magical run? I don't. They're going to be a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to go on a magical run. But as an organization, I think the Ravens are far from being over. I think they'll do what needs to be done going forward. They'll be legitimate Super Bowl contenders next season.
Mo, who's under more pressure this season? The Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens. Like, let's assume that the Chiefs
coming into the season, I would have said the Ravens.
But right now, though, so the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl. So they all go to the playoffs. One of them has to play the Chiefs. I don't care who you want to have play the Chiefs in this scenario. Or even maybe they both play the Chiefs. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. The Ravens and the Bills are not. Is it equally as devastating for both teams? Is it worse for one or the other? Because aren't they riding a very similar trajectory right now, with the exception that, Lamar has the hardware and the actual accolades to go with his spot as a successful quarterback, whereas Josh Allen doesn't. So Lamar's got the MVPs, and he's putting together another stat season that could potentially put him in line for a third MVP. Whereas, although Josh Allen is regarded by most as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, he doesn't have the MVPs to cement that like Lamar does. But at the same time, they both have the same bugaboo, which is they can't get to a Super Bowl. And they've both been favored in different times, different windows. They're both viewed as high-end teams in the AFC. They're both viewed as playoff teams. They're both viewed as threats to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. But, how much of a threat is a threat if they've never done it? And if we go through another season where neither of them does it and Mahomes goes back to another Super Bowl, I don't care if he wins or loses it. That's a different conversation, because if he loses the Super Bowl, he's not losing it to either of those teams. He's losing it to probably the Eagles or the Lions. So if I'm looking at the AFC, and once again, it's Mahomes and the Chiefs there, meaning that Allen and Lamar, for whatever reason, and I get it, it's a team sport, it's a lot more than just the quarterback, but these are the quarterbacks are the ones that get all the accolades and take all the lumps when their team loses. So if it's another one of those, is it equally felt by both? Is it a bigger disappointment for one or the other?
Yeah, I kind of think both franchises and quarterbacks are on the same track, but we're dealing in this season, I would say right now, is Josh Allen, because you know what he's done? He beat them in the regular season, right? He beat the Chiefs, right? That just builds up the expectations of what Buffalo can be. Josh Allen is having an MVP caliber season. I think this build up, everything favors, well, if they meet in the AFC title game, we got them this year. I've heard that before. You've heard that before too. And then they get to the AFC title game and the Chiefs limp in there. Even with their great record, they're not impressive, and yet they find a way to win. I think both teams are on the same track, but right now, I think the bigger disappointment would be if Josh Allen and Buffalo have the second best record in AFC, or maybe even the best record. We're not done yet, and they still can't beat the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, speaking of the Buffalo Bills, it was announced this week that the final plans for the Bills' new stadium have been finalized, and it will not have a retractable roof, nor will it be a dome. This is a $2 billion project that is taking place up there in the Orchard Park area. Mo, for me, it is the stupidest thing that I have ever heard of in my life. Put a retractable roof on it. The roof can be open every time. I'm not saying Buffalo should play inside. I fully believe that Buffalo should be playing in the elements. Let them play in this. Don't take away the home field advantage that the Buffalo Bills have. But by putting a retractable roof on that thing, you do a couple of things. One, you open it on game day, and you're not having to pay $20 to a bunch of Buffalo Bills schlubs to come shovel out your stadium while you're cooking them hot dogs in the parking lot. That's number one. And number two, be smart financially. You don't use that stadium for 4 months out of the year, except for Buffalo Bills home games, which happen, 4 times, 5 times during that period? A couple more if it's the playoffs, maybe? Make some money. Put the roof on it, and now you have a place where you can do stuff all year long. And I saw the comments from Bills fans. We're tough. We put ourselves through I don't care. It has nothing to do with you putting yourself through burning tables. I'm not trying to take away your home field advantage. You still got your home field advantage. I'm just saying, if you're going to build a $2 billion stadium, why not put the retractable roof on so that you have the option, so that the option is there? And it's not just about you. It's about your entire city and the money your city could be making from this new project. I don't know. I guess there's people smarter than me involved in this, but
I don't know. I'm with you. It's about making money, and the venue could obviously, you could hold a lot of different events there, concerts. It would become a destination point for concerts and things of that nature. I'm thinking the way you're thinking, but again,
you could hold a Super Bowl there too. By the way, it's got a roof on it.
You could. But isn't that not so Buffalo? We're tough. We want the snow. We want to pay our fans money. This is what I get it. That's Buffalo being Buffalo. It is what it is. I wouldn't go that route, but I get it. That's their thing.
That's their thing. The Steelers take out the Bengals in a shootout. Listen, I got nothing against what the Steelers are doing. Usually it's their defense that is finding ways to kind of guide them to victories, and Russ is just doing enough. But on this day, 44 points from the offense, I didn't know I would predict that, Mo. If you told me that the Bengals were going to score 38, I don't know if I would have put money on the Steelers scoring 40 to win that game. So bravo to the Steelers, because now we're kind of seeing them do it different ways.
I wouldn't have put money on the Steelers scoring like that, but at the same time, it's just further proof that the Bengals defense is garbage. It is the worst defense. I watched that game and I wasn't wowed. I was just looking at it going like, I think Russ should be cutting this defense apart. It's a horrible defense. No pass rush, nothing in the back. I mean, they're just a bad defense. It's weird because you watch Joe Burrow and he's having this amazing season, and their defense does just enough to not help them win.
The Texans hold on against the Jaguars team that was missing Trevor Lawrence for a good chunk of the second half of that game. They get the 23-20 win over Jacksonville. It does nothing for me for Houston going forward. I still think Houston is a very vulnerable team. I mean, after Lawrence left, Houston jumped up a little bit. I was like, oh, it's going to be a blowout now because Lawrence isn't in there. And then Jacksonville started to come back, and they stuck around, and they pulled it out at the end. Win's a win. But, again, in my eyes, Houston should be winning these games by a lot more than they are. Houston is very much a team that plays to their opponent. And that's fine when you're getting wins during the regular season, but it's going to be a different look come playoff time. And I think Houston is still a step or two away from being in that Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City conversation, though.
I agree. The thing about the Texans is I think they'd be a much more formidable football team if they were getting better quarterback play. I'm not saying CJ Stroud is awful by any means, but he's clearly taken a step back. We do this all the time with young quarterbacks. The league has adjusted to him. He has not adjusted to what the league is doing to him. He looks very ordinary to me. Not horrible or terrible, but I don't see him as an overcomer. We talk about this all the time, that guys that can make something out of nothing. Right now, he's just getting by. If you watch a Texans game, they're horrible on first and second down, and they're not great on third down. They keep the other team, their offense keeps the other team in the game, and that's primarily because CJ Stroud has not been very efficient overall.
The New York Jets fall to the Seattle Seahawks. The Commanders blow out the Tennessee Titans. The Minnesota Vikings win a close one with the Arizona Cardinals. The Patriots lose after coming pretty close to making a 68-yard field goal as regulation expires, giving the win to the Colts. The Chargers beat up a pathetic-looking Atlanta Falcons team. We talked about that yesterday. And we got those Kansas City Chiefs, call them the cardiac kids, Mo. 19-17 to the Raiders on Black Friday. Was it a false start? Was it an illegal shift? We keep having these little situations where it looks like the Chiefs are going to lose and something weird happens and they end up getting the victory. Once again, that happens with the Las Vegas Raiders. Say what you will, but Mo, I think we are both in agreement that we're not picking against Mahomes until someone beats him. I'm not picking against Mahomes until someone beats him. I learned that lesson last season because I went Ravens. The Ravens looked unstoppable, and Mahomes found a way to get it to win. Here we are again. So, yes, should the Chiefs have lost a handful of games that they won this season? Absolutely. Is Mahomes playing great football? No, he's not. You can give me all the reasons why the Chiefs are not going to have a dominant playoff run, and I'm just going to show you the previous 2 seasons and be like, this is why they are. So until they don't, I'm going Chiefs.
I'm going Chiefs as well. I have to see it to believe it. Kansas City is just a different animal. They just haven't played their best football, but I think they've just found a way to win. Is there some luck involved at times? Sure, but they're really good. They're really good when they need to be. They don't wow you statistically, offensively, and yet Mahomes is still the scariest guy in the NFL. If you're up a field goal and he's got time on the clock, I don't feel good for you or your team. Trust me, I've felt it. I've lived it. They're the champs. Until somebody knocks the champs out, they're still the champs.
The Dallas Cowboys knock off the New York Giants. Like Micah said, Mo, they're not done yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're not done, and yet they're done. You know what I mean? I get it. I think what they're doing is they're just messing up their draft position. But yeah, you know, you're supposed to compete. You're supposed to compete. I get it. But you know, and I know, and they know they're not going to the playoffs. But okay, all right, compete. Go ahead.
What looked like was going to be a blowout on Thanksgiving. It became a very competitive game with the Lions and the Bears. We're about to get the NFL genius himself in here, Gene in here. But before we do that, Mo, do you have any concern about the Lions and games being a lot closer than maybe you think they should be with some of the opponents that they're playing? Because that's really the conversation right now. When you're talking NFC and you're talking Lions or Eagles, the narrative that is beginning to form for the Lions is, you know, yes, they haven't lost since week 1 or week 2 or whatever it is. They have the longer winning streak than the Eagles do. But if you look at the caliber and the quality of the games that the Lions have been playing this season, they've been leaving teams in it that they should be stopping, right? They've been allowing teams to get back into games. And, yeah, they find a way to win in the end. But they're playing with fire is kind of the narrative right now with Detroit, whereas the narrative with Philadelphia is they just kind of keep trending upward as we get towards the playoffs. So do you buy into that narrative, or you have any concern with Detroit with the fact that they've had a couple of games where they've let people back in but hung on to win in the end, or are we just kind of splitting hairs at this point?
I don't really buy into it. I will say this. They've mowed their way through the NFC for the better part of the season, as expected. Have they had some stinkers? They have, but they found a way to win most of them. What I would say is, though, should they meet the Eagles, this is a team that is on par with them, to me, at the line of scrimmage. Detroit has an offensive line that mauls people as well, but I don't think they faced an offensive line like the Eagles. They haven't faced a running attack like the Eagles. So I'm not assuming who's going to win that matchup. I'm just saying that the talent level goes up a notch to me on both sides of the football when you're facing the Eagles. I want to see Detroit beat a great football team, but the truth of the matter is there are not a lot of great football teams to me in the NFC. There's some good ones, but I think the Eagles is the biggest challenge for them, and we won't know the answer to that question until they meet. And I think they will meet the NFC title game.
Let's get the NFL genius in here. We got some more football things to discuss. First of all and foremost, Gene, welcome in this morning. How are you, sir?
Phenomenal. Feeling good after a big win Sunday. Happy what the Philadelphia Eagles accomplished. I'm feeling really good.
Gene, let's get your opinion first on the thing we were just talking about with the Detroit Lions. That is the narrative that is currently building. There's some validity to it, I feel, because at this point in the season, when you're looking at two teams that are just winning all their games and have been since the early point of the season, you have to look at something to start to distinguish them. And the narrative is that although the Lions have the better record and they have the longer winning streak, defensively, they're just not on the same level as the Eagles. And the proof is that they keep letting these teams back into games that it looks like early is going to be a blowout, or it's just competitive the entire time when maybe on paper it shouldn't be. Do you buy into this narrative with the Lions, or is this just the ups and downs of an NFL season?
I don't buy into that narrative. The narrative that needs to be talked about with the Lions is their injured reserve list just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Just lost Malcolm Rodrigo, and if you've watched Hard Knocks, you know about Rigo and like what he essentially does for that linebacking core. They also lost their starting defensive tackle opposite DJ Reader for the year. Now you obviously go back to Aiden Hutchinson being lost just a few weeks ago. Their IR list on the defensive side of the football just keeps adding up. And that's what concerns me the most. Not that you played a division rival close. It's division rivalry. It happens. They beat up on the previous few teams. They smacked Jacksonville 3 weeks ago. They beat Indianapolis pretty comfortable in Indy. But Chicago, closer game. Now, I think Green Bay is walking into this game versus Detroit way healthier than Detroit is. So I think that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out Thursday.
All right, gentlemen, the biggest debate of the NFL right now is Trevor Lawrence and the hit that he received. A lot of this started with DeMeco Ryans' comments, where DeMeco, he defended his player. And in no certain terms, kind of put some blame on Trevor Lawrence. Basically saying that, Trevor Lawrence kind of slid late. And, the NFL allows quarterbacks to kind of do this thing where, we want to protect them, but then we allow them to put themselves in these situations, and it's not fair to the defenders. And I think the initial response coming out of that was, he's defending his guy. Like, it is what it is. Then Tom stepped in, and Tom Brady doubled down and was like, quarterbacks should start getting penalized. If you slide late and you are putting yourself in that position, you should get penalized because you're almost doing something unfair to the defensive players. Tom then took it as far as saying, listen, are we really protecting the quarterbacks? We are running the quarterbacks more than we have ever run the quarterbacks in NFL history. You want to tell me we're protecting quarterbacks, but yet offensive coordinators and head coaches are designing plays where the quarterbacks are out there getting hit because they're running the football. So Tom pushed the narrative that this is a quarterback issue and not a defensive issue. So, gentlemen, I bring the question to you. Mo, we're going to start with you, sir. Whose fault is this? If you need to start assigning blame here, is this Trevor Lawrence's fault because it was a late slide? Is this the defender's fault because instead of just going over Lawrence, he went down to him and on his level and went at his head? Is this a bigger issue for quarterbacks or the defenses? Where do you fall after hearing DeMeco's comments and then Tom Brady's comments on the situation?
I don't think it was Trevor Lawrence's fault. Look, you can say that quarterbacks play with fire when they're running along the sidelines because they stretch out. They always stretch out the run, and right before they're out of bounds, somebody's already launched themselves in the air and they get hit. I think they play with fire in that sense. I would blame the quarterbacks on that situation because I do think they get away with a lot dealing with the sidelines. But that particular hit, what's a late slide? He slid and you still launched yourself with your elbows extended going towards his head. That's not a legal hit regardless. I get what DeMeco Ryans is doing. That's his guy. Are quarterbacks running more? Yeah, the ones that run. I don't like the idea that they're not all running. Kyler Murray's running. Lamar Jackson's run. There's guys that run, but most quarterbacks are not running unless you're like somebody like the young man out in Carolina where you're running for your life. That's different. But you're not. It's not a design run. You're running for your life. So I look, and the thing about it, it's not like the guy doesn't have a history of doing this. It's kind of his thing. So if that's your history, if you've got a history, I think DeMeco Ryans is wrong on this. That's your guy, but your guy's got a history of doing this. So to me, he's at blame.
So that's the part that you just nailed, Mo. Is I feel like that Chris, the narrative that you put out and that Tom Brady put out and that's being talked about, is a correct narrative on a lot of different scenarios where quarterbacks put themselves in this position where they slide late. I think it was somewhat of a late slide by Trevor Lawrence, if I'm being completely unbiased about it. But Azeez Al-Shaair did everything wrong on that play. Like everything textbook they tell you not to do, he did wrong on that play. And if it was like the first offense for Azeez, it might be like one of those things where I'm like, all right, wrong place, wrong time, playing hard. Man, this guy's got a whole video compilation like that would make Whitney Houston jealous of all the dirty hits that he's put out. And it's not just, it's just a wrong claim. It's a wrong time to make the mistake. You shouldn't be pushing all your chips in on Azeez Al-Shaair. Led directly, launched angle, went to the head neck area. Like there's a million things he did wrong on that play. It was a dirty hit. There's a reason he was suspended for 3 games for this hit. It's not like he was suspended for 3 games because it was the first time he's ever done something. If that was the case, go back to the Kiko Alonso hit. Like when Kiko Alonso knocked, you know what I mean? Like these hits happen in the NFL. I think quarterbacks slide late. But to answer your question, it's kind of twofold. One, I think you're right. I think that quarterbacks do put themselves in that position. But 2, this is not the one that we want to use as the universal. Like this should be it.
Don't make him the poster boy for defensive players are getting robbed.
Correct.
Was the 3 games warranted?
Yes, for his future, for what he's done throughout. Like he's got so many dirty hits, man. He's always on this list. He's always headhunting, taking people out. Yes, the answer is yes.
Gene, Dak Prescott has come out and said that he feels that Mike McCarthy deserves to return to the Cowboys as their head coach in 2025. He says he deserves another contract. Lip service, Dak kind of pulling the Russell Wilson and just, saying all the right things? Or do you buy into it that Mike McCarthy deserves to be the Dallas Cowboys head coach next season?
He absolutely believes that. I'm going to tell you why he believes it. Number 1, last year was his best year. It was number 2 to MVP in MVP voting. Number 2, the GM or /owner /whatever did nothing to help this franchise in the offseason. We talked about it all year. We're going all in. And then they signed 2 people in the offseason. None of them impact players. They traded a 4th-round draft pick for Jonathan Mingo. Are we out of – is it real? Like, is that real? Like, I still go back and look at that. That's got to be one of the fleeces of the year. Yeah, the answer is I believe Dak believes that. Do I think Mike deserves another shot? No. But here's the thing you gotta look at. If they bring in a new coach and the new coach goes to Jerry, hey, you just gave me a 5-year contract. This guy's not it. His decision-making's poor, not marrying that coach to the quarterback. That ends up bringing a little, Dak could get out of his contract. Whereas right now he knows that if Mike McCarthy gets another extension, he knows that his guy is in place. The guy that believes in him is in place. I don't think McCarthy's a terrible coach for the job. What I think was a terrible decision was when they replaced Dan Quinn with that bumbling idiot that used to coach up in Minnesota, Mike Zimmer, and that defense just completely fell off a cliff. And everyone just go, what's wrong with the defense? I heard you guys talking earlier about the Ravens. What's wrong with their defense? I hear it all year. Mike McDonald's not there. Like, what? Why is the Philadelphia Eagles defense so good? Vic Fangio's there. Like, when you have a good coordinator, a lot of that stuff on defense, why is the Jets defense now suddenly terrible? Robert Saleh's not there. Like, it happens throughout the league. And I think what Dallas did was a really poor job of hiring a defensive coordinator and a really poor job of putting pieces around to win in the NFL. But once again, as an Eagles fan, blow it up. Do something stupid. Cowboy's going to cowboy. Go Cowboy.
Mo, it's not often that you and I potentially agree with things that Micah Parsons says, but Micah Parsons on his podcast this week, he said that the Cleveland Browns should just let it ride with Jameis. Jameis is a better quarterback for the Cleveland Browns compared to everything else they have on the roster right now. So if next season it is between all of the current quarterbacks on the Cleveland Browns roster, He says, let Jameis do his thing. I kind of agree. If those are your options, if you're not going to draft a quarterback, which by the way you should, but if you're not going to draft a quarterback and you're just going to roll with your current quarterback room, you better go with Jameis, because at least you're scoring points with Jameis Winston and your games are fun to watch with Jameis Winston.
They are fun to watch. Look, the one thing we can all agree on is that Jameis Winston is an entertaining player, and he does score points for your team and the other team. The thing about Jameis is you can see the arm talent. You can see it. He can make all the throws, but he always makes the really, really bad throws. That comes with Jameis. Now, to Micah Parsons' point, if you're not drafting a quarterback and that's your quarterback room, then he is your starting quarterback. He is your best option. For whatever you think of Deshaun Watson, at least the current version of him, I think Jameis Winston's better than him. He's better than him. That guy's not trying to win football games when he's in the game. He's trying not to lose them. He's a shell of his former self. So, yeah, if you're going to keep this quarterback unit together, that's going to be your quarterback room, I agree Jameis should be there. If nothing else, yes, he is entertaining on and off the field. The guy is a hell of a preacher before and after games. He is a soundbite waiting to happen, and I'm here for it.
You're hired as the Browns general manager, and the first thing you're told is we're not bringing another quarterback in. And you're like, okay. Oh, okay. You have to decide, though, who's starting. Is it Jameis? Is it Deshaun? Or who's their third-string quarterback?
Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
That's right, DTR. Those are your three. Who are you rolling with?
Well, I'm rolling Jameis out of that group. And that's selfishly on my end because he's so damn entertaining to watch play football. And, like, it's just everything, right? It's everything from the pregame to the postgame. I almost hope he pulls out some of these wins so I can hear some of his postgame speeches, especially on primetime. And I don't know how lucky they've gotten to get like back-to-back primetime games for the Thursday night and the Monday night, but it's absolute cinema. I love watching Jameis play football. But can I give you a different scenario though for them?
Yeah.
What is every Cleveland Brown a college fan of? Every Cleveland Brown fan is a college football fan of what team?
Ohio State.
The Ohio State.
Ohio State.
So 100%. So here's I'm going to give you what I think might happen. A lot of people don't know this, but current Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers used to be an Ohio State commit. He was promised a job as starting quarterback for Ohio State, and C.J. Stroud wanted to stay one more season. So Quinn Ewers is like, all right, I'm out. Went to Texas and starts for Texas the last 2 years. He got a lot of flack on social media. A lot of Ohio fans were like, this is kind of crazy that you're running from competition and like it's insane that you don't want to be here, and a lot of like hatred spelt his way. Where the Browns are picking, probably around 6 through 8, I can see an absolute reunion of Quinn Ewers in the state of Ohio. I just think that'll be a very interesting storyline to keep your eye on. I think Quinn Ewers is the best pure quarterback in this draft. I think Shedeur is the best quarterback, but the most pure pocket passing quarterback with Stefanski's system. It works perfectly for what he likes to run. I think Quinn Ewers to Cleveland is almost a certainty.
Gene, obviously, we don't think Aaron is going to be back with the New York Jets next season, which means the Jets are going to be in the market for a new quarterback. We're assuming they're going to draft a quarterback, but you then get into that idea of if you're going to draft a quarterback, do you put a veteran in place to start the season or for a year, depending on where you draft and how much of a project the quarterback you draft is going to be. So now you have this fun little rumor that's circulating out there of, is there a possibility, Gene, that Sam Darnold, who only has a year in Minnesota, could return as the starting quarterback for the New York Jets based on A, who they draft and whether or not they're ready to play week 1 next season, and based on the fact that he's having a good season this year in Minnesota, And we would assume that J.J. McCarthy, if healthy, is going to be given the keys to that team, or is he? So let's start there. If J.J. is ready to go week 1 next season, Minnesota goes to the play. Let's say they win a playoff game, and then they lose their second game in the playoffs. That's it for Minnesota. Is J.J., without question, your starter going into next season because you project him to be the future? Is it a competition? Like, what do you do with that quarterback situation if you're Minnesota? If Sam wins you a playoff game, JJ's healthy and ready to go and looks like what we think he's going to look like. I don't know what they expect him to look like, but he's progressing to where he should be. He doesn't look terrible. He doesn't look worse than he did during camp this past season. He looks where you think he should be. Are you starting JJ over Darnold?
So I know it's not the same thing because Sam wasn't drafted in Minnesota, but this reminds me of the Drew Brees, Philip Rivers situation that happened from the Chargers, where Drew Brees finally figured it out and it finally clicked for him the year they drafted Philip Rivers. And Philip Rivers sat behind him for a whole year. And then they kind of re-signed Drew for 1 year. And they had Drew play quarterback. And then he had that really bad arm injury. And then he ended up signing with New Orleans the next year. But this reminds me of that scenario a lot. I could see them bringing Sam Darnold back on a 1-year deal or franchise tagging him. But if I'm Sam, I don't do that, right? And if I'm Minnesota, I have to think to myself, do I want to invest $20 million into because that's what Sam's going to cost next year. Believe it or not, he's going to get $20 to $25 million to be a 1-year starter anywhere. Do I want to invest $20 to $25 million in Sam Darnold when I drafted a quarterback in the first round? Or do I want to invest in getting better players to play defense? That defensive scheme is incredible, but could you imagine if they had not Stephon Gilmore as cornerback too? Could you imagine if they upgraded some of their defensive line deficiencies? I think that the move for the Vikings is to use that money and build around J.J. McCarthy. And even if you take a step back next year, not having Sam Darnold in the building makes the most sense for Minnesota, because now it's J.J. McCarthy struggles, you got to keep the fan base off. Well, he's our guy. This is our guy at this point. And then as far as your question about Sam Darnold going back to the Jets, it would have to be the perfect coaching staff, the perfect situation for him to go back to. I don't think there's any reason why he would go back there. I think that's a very bad idea. He already seen ghosts in that stadium. No way I would want to go back to New York in that situation and how everything transpired. But what I will say is this. Give the Jets credit. Right now, they're doing everything the way they should. Right now. Take a week ago, 2 weeks ago, right now. They're going to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. They're going to hire a general manager. That general manager is going to hire his own coach. That coach is going to draft his own quarterback. What you need to do as the Jets is then you need to build up that offensive line to protect that quarterback. So it's a lot of moving pieces that are happening. If I'm the Jets, I'm definitely drafting someone. I'm definitely bringing someone in or drafting someone. But I don't think Sam Darnold's not going to be that person.
If you're the new general manager for the New York Jets, are you giving an interview to Rex Ryan?
Yes. I think Rex Ryan, listen, if he's not in charge of making decisions on drafting the quarterback, then I would love Rex Ryan to be my coach.
I love Rex Ryan.
How do you not? The guy gets teams to play. If you remember the 2008 Jets, and I'm sure you do, you're a Dolphins fan, but 2 years ago, 2006, they were awful. Their defense was terrible. They're the best defense in football in 2008. And what Rex Ryan does is he gets people to buy in. He gets people to play hard. He gets people to fight. And everything he says on ESPN, man, I couldn't agree with more. When he gets on there and he goes, what they did with Daniel Jones and the situations that he's talking about, players aren't playing hard, they've quit on their team. He's like, that's never going to happen. I would love Rex Ryan to be my guy. If I have the right GM that's draft and Rex Ryan, hey, guy, listen, Rex, we're going to bring you in. We want you to be the coach. We want you to handle the defense. We need to hire an offense coordinator. Kellen Moore better be your offense coordinator. You better get an offensive coordinator. Bobby Slowick better be your offensive coordinator. It's got to be someone of that stature to coach the offense, and the GM needs to be drafting the quarterback.
All right, gentlemen. I teased this to Gene yesterday off air, and we're going to wrap it up with this segment today. We're going to talk about the greatest NBA franchises historically. Gentlemen, there was a list that was released last week. I'm going to kind of run through the tiers on the list.
Can I ask you a quick question before you run through the tiers? I looked at the list.
Yes, sir.
What is the basis of the list, like the tiers? Why are like just great, in my opinion, great, your opinion, great, like winning, or like what is the tier of the list?
So the tier is historical greatness as far as success as a franchise.
Okay.
And I'm assuming success would be winnings, championships, notoriety, that sort of thing.
Okay, that's fair.
So we're going to start with the top of the list, Mo. Tier, and there's 5. We're not going to add tiers. So we could easily sit here and say, oh, drop this team a tier, make a new tier. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep the 5 tiers. We're going to go A, B, C, D, F, because it just lines up that way. So, Mo, if you're looking at the A franchises historically in the NBA, according to this list, there's only 3. It is the Los Angeles Lakers, it is the Boston Celtics, and it is the San Antonio Spurs. Mo, do you agree that those are the 3 all-time A franchises in the NBA?
I would go with that. I'm fine with that. I feel like because the Spurs have been a great franchise, they have 5 titles, but look at what the Warriors have done recently. I'm not so sure that the Warriors and Spurs should be on the same tier. I think the Celtics and Lakers should be on their own tier. There isn't any other franchise that's close to them. Even if you threw in Jordan's Bulls, they don't belong there either. So I'm okay with the Spurs being there, but I really think it's 2 teams that should be in the top tier.
Gene, should the Spurs be in tier A?
I had the same opinion Mo had when I looked at it. I'm like, I get it. We're trying to put a 3rd team up there, but like just add one more team to tier B. If you had to put a 3rd team up there, I think the Spurs edge out the other teams like Miami, Golden State.
Right.
But if you don't have to put a 3rd team up there, I think the Lakers and the Celtics are the absolute class of the NBA.
So if we're looking at the A's being the Lakers and the Celtics, Gene, tier B, Warriors, Knicks, Pistons, Miami, the 76ers, Chicago Bulls. Is there anyone that shouldn't be that one step below the Lakers and the Celtics?
Oh, yeah. I don't know what the New York Knicks have done.
He read my mind.
Tier 2. Like, what? Like, why? Because they're New York? I don't understand that at all. They've been, listen, outside the last year and a half, they've been one of the worst franchises in basketball for 20 years. Like, they're not good. And even when they were good, they didn't win much. No, the Knicks should definitely not be in tier 2. Absolutely not in tier 2.
Agreed.
So, Mo, tier 3 brings us to the Phoenix Suns, the Trailblazers, the Thunder, the Mavericks, the Cavaliers, the Raptors, the Bucks, and the Houston Rockets. If we're dropping the Knicks down, I'll let you bring one up. Of those 3, who do you of that group of tier 3? Who do you bring up to replace the Knicks?
Mo, I trust you. I know we're in Ponico. We're on the same. There's a team to move up. Who is it?
Probably the Rockets.
Let's go. I'm in Mo. Agreed.
Yeah, it's got to be the Rockets.
Agreed. 100%. Me and you we're in wavelength right now. It's almost like we rehearsed this. We did not.
Right.
So that leaves the Suns, the Trailblazers, the Thunder, the Mavs, the Cavs, the Raptors, the Bucks. Those are your C's. Your D's all time in NBA history.
Can I bring one down to the D's?
You can. Who do you want to drop?
I once again, this is another one of those things I just don't get. The Toronto Raptors won 1 championship with Kawhi Leonard 1 year. No, there's there's a team in the D's I want to replace with them. So, like, I want to be very clear. Let's take the Toronto Raptors and move them down to the D because that's where they belong.
The D's currently are the Pacers, the Jazz, the Nets, the Hawks, the Nuggets, the Magic, and the Wizards. Who are you bringing up?
3 of them. You could bring up 3 teams in this.
You could bring the Nuggets up.
The Nuggets, the Pacers, and the Jazz, all 3 are historically better teams than the Raptors, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and even the Trailblazers. Listen, I know the Trailblazers were great in the 70s and early 90s with Drexler, but they didn't win anything either.
Right.
So you could easily replace the Trailblazers, the Toronto Raptors, and the Oklahoma City Thunder with the Pacers, the Nuggets, and the Jazz. And when you look at basketball, and Mo will correct me because I know he knows a lot more than I do, but when you look at basketball and break it down, you look at some of those historical Pacers teams or even the Mailman and Stockton, the Jazz teams, and then the Nuggets who've been great recently, and they have one of the greatest scorers ever in the 80s. They had the mellow years. Like, the Nuggets have not been a bad franchise. I don't think they're a D franchise.
I agree with that. 100%. I think the Jazz are, you could argue, I think they're the most underrated franchise in history. Like, that Utah Jazz franchise lived in the conference finals. And when they weren't in the conference finals, they went to multiple finals. It's just their lot in life. They had to play a certain guy.
Well, also their lot in life is no one wants to play in Utah. That is
a fact. That is a fact.
Every year is themselves.
But Chris, the fun part of that is, can you imagine being a franchise where no one wants to play in Utah, yet you're constantly competitive?
Yeah.
So let's give that franchise some credit.
And then, gentlemen, the bottom of the pile, Mo, the Fs, if you will. It is the Hornets, the Kings, the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, the Timberwolves, and little brother, the Los Angeles Clippers. Mo, any issue with any of those Fs?
No, they all belong there. The Timberwolves are a franchise that's on the come up, but if we're going historically, they're where they're supposed to be.
I got one small, and I bet you Mo agrees with me. I think the Timberwolves, with another successful year, have officially passed the Washington Wizards / Bullets. I would swap Washington and Minnesota after this year.
Look, I'm with you because you can make the same claim about the Wizards or the Bullets, whatever you want to call them, as you did about the Knicks. When they won their one title, when they were any good, was back in the 70s.
Yeah. I think Minnesota will be a better, like, you got the KG years. Yeah, you had some good years with Karl Anthony Towns and Jimmy Butler, and now you're in the Ant Edwards years. I think that with a little bit more sustained success, Minnesota should be the team that takes the jump out of the cellar and pulling the historically bad. Like, you know, NBA teams are like, let's just not be like them. And I'm talking about the Wizards, like Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma being the face of your franchise, like, not working.
That says a lot.
If there was ever a team added to that top tier, who has the best resume today and, you know, procasting over the next 10 years? Not saying they're going to be there because there's so much history with the Celtics and the Lakers. You would need decades of success and resume building to put yourself on that level. But if you're just looking at the Warriors, the Spurs, the Pistons, the Miami Heat, the 76ers, and the Chicago Bulls, and you're looking at the next potential 10 years of these franchises, who has the best argument 10 years from now, even if it's a losing argument,
Spurs,
to say we should be up there with the Lakers and the Celtics?
It's the Spurs. They're set up to turn around because they've got Wemby. They've got their guy. It's going to be the Spurs.
I feel like me and Mo should, like, literally be one voice at this point. In my head, I'm thinking, well, yeah, 10 years from now, it'll be the Spurs. They have Wemby. And he goes, it's the Spurs. No, I think it's the Spurs. And I also think that you always have to look into, like, you got to see how Golden State moves forward after Stephen Curry years, if they put together another run. And then Heat culture is always a thing. I think that the Heat need to land another superstar player. But they're always relevant. They're always a good franchise. But yeah, it's the Spurs with Wemby. You got Wemby and Pop, and I love the way they look this year. And I don't know, someone predicted them to finish top 5, top 6 in the West.
Who was that guy? Who was that guy?
I'm telling you right now,
it wasn't me, but I did predict them to make the playoffs.
I think they're going to be a top 6 playoff seed in the West this year. I really believe it. And everything I've seen so far, I expect them to be below 500 at this point. They're not. So I expected them to be below 500 before the haves and the have-nots, before teams start tanking. They're going to pick up a lot of wins down the stretch versus teams that don't want to win basketball games.
Gene, what's going on tonight on Wire to Wire Sports?
Football, and football. Hopefully Juan Soto signs today. It's supposed to happen soon, but I want that to happen because it will put a little break in all the football talk that we have tonight. But really, there's no UFC card going on right now. We'll probably do a quick NBA update, but like the in-season tournament just finished, so we'll talk about that for not finished, but the seeding is about to get situated. So we'll probably touch on that and see where we're at there. But yeah, it'll be a lot of football.
With the recent loss for Colorado, Gene, are you buying that he stays or is he going to go?
What are you talking
about? That being Coach Prime.
I think Coach Prime stays for another year. I think there's a lot of kids he made promises to, even without Shedeur, even without Travis. I think there's a lot of kids that he made promises to that are there. I think that he wants to see. I think this offseason him won't be about recruiting as much as it is about getting his players ready for the next level.
And then, Gene, last thing, I saved this just for you. Mo and I talked about it earlier this week. Lonzo Ball and his Mount Rushmore of NBA players, and not specifically who is on his Mount Rushmore, but his argument for Kobe not being on anyone's Mount Rushmore is he's got the most misses ever, which, by the way, he doesn't. But what do you think on Lonzo's take on one Sir Kobe Bryant?
But see, that's the thing, right? Like I have no problem with Lonzo Ball's Mount Rushmore. I'm like, oh, Steph changed the game. These young kids are doing A, B, and C. Shaq was the most dominant, and then you have Jordan and LeBron. I'm fine with that being your Mount Rushmore. It's wrong, but I'm fine with that being your Mount Rushmore. Right. It's just like the unnecessary side shot to a guy that can't defend himself. Right. It's like what made no sense. It was dumb. She's like, oh, you don't have Kobe in us? Here's a perfect response, Lonzo. Take the Gene Walzak School of PR. Kobe was great, and he was legendary. And I just think that he was just cut a little bit different than Jordan. Jordan's just a step up. So Kobe's sitting firm in my next four.
Right.
Easy take. Respect the player. These are my guys. Oh, no, it's the most misses ever. You're going to throw out a stat that's incorrect. And it's a stat in which you forget 6 years of Kobe's career. He played with nobodies, and he was trying to carry them to wins after Shaq left. And before he got Gasol and Bynum, they were constantly the 7 seed on his back. Like, stop. You just sound dumb.
And it's interesting because you think, and this is obviously proof, but you think that, guys who play the game, they just have a better knowledge and understanding of the game because it's the game they play. Yeah. And then you see comments like this and you're like, oh, no, they don't. They don't. Just because you play it doesn't mean you get it.
Here, Brandon Miller said that his greatest player of all time was Paul George.
He did say that.
We say these people have what? Are you just looking for a soundbite? You just want to say something stupid. Like, I don't think Paul George's mom thinks he's the greatest player of all
time. Not Mama George.
Nobody believes that. No one in their right mind believes that. I can have a conversation. I feel like me, Mo, and Brett one night should just do an educational piece of what the top 10 basketball players are of all time.
I support that. Gene, we appreciate you stopping by, sir. We'll catch you tonight on Wire to Wire Sports. Thank you so much.
Appreciate y'all. Take care.
Mo, Gene alluded to it a little bit ago. It could be signing day for Juan Soto. They're talking about him wanting to be signed before the winter meetings end, but they're also saying that ideally the target could be to get him wrapped up before the winter meetings even begin, which means that could be coming up. And Mo, your Dodgers are still in it. The Dodgers are still one of the main teams that are going after Juan Soto. Because, money is no option over there when you can pay Ohtani and just say, but we'll actually pay him, 20 years from now will actually pay him. I'm just intrigued. I almost hope the Dodgers do sign him and pay him 20. I want to see the Dodgers 20 years from now. I want to be in my 50s and 60s and watching the Dodgers win 14 games a season.
It's not going to be pretty. What do they say? That eventually the bills got to be paid. Like when the bills got to be paid, that is going to be an ugly. I get it. You're looking to win now. I get it, but down the road, they're going to be a really bad franchise.
I feel bad because obviously, the current regime outside of ownership, they're not going to be here when the bill has to be paid.
This is true. This is true.
That poor general manager who's going to be like, who agreed to this? Who agreed to give all these guys money 20 years ago, and I'm paying for it today?
They're going to be paying for guys that are not on the team anymore. Like they're like this guy's still getting checks.
Multiple guys, guys,
and not little checks. They're getting huge checks as if they're currently playing.
Now this isn't going to be Bobby Bonilla money.
No.
This is going to be look at our starting players who aren't here that retired 15 years ago.
Right.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. Mo, bring us to the end, sir.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. Make sure you check out all the great content we have at Wire to Wire Network. Wire to Wire Network, we appreciate you.
Hey, make sure you're back here, same time, same place tomorrow. We are breaking down all of the Week 13 action in the NFL season. If you are playing fantasy football, playoffs start this week for a lot of fantasy football leagues. So make sure that you are getting those lineups ready to go, unless you're me and you got buys in all your leagues because you're just that guy. So, you know. But make sure you're back here, same time, same place, Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show, powered by Wire to Wire Network.